All right, hour number 2 here on a Thursday. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, One Bills Live. Thanks for joining us. And we'll get on to the sleepers here in this Bills draft class in just a second, but pleased to be joined now by NFL.com draft researcher and analyst, Chad Reuter, joining us on the program. Good to have you, Chad. I want to jump right in here because I think your overall grade for the Bills class was a B+, but your highest grade, because you went day 1, day 2, day 3, was for day 3. You gave them an A. Maybe just shed a little light on why you felt so positively about what they hauled in day 3.
Well, I'm sure that the fact that I had 3 of the guys projected to be picked by the Bills in my 7-round mock draft had nothing to do with it, right? That had nothing to do with it. No, look, I think they got really good value in the players they had, and they hit good needs. They hit needs for this team, and I think Ufosio is really a good linebacker. Kind of looks like a running back, but he doesn't play like one. And I think he was a really solid pick for them. I figured they'd look at him. Cedric Van Pran is a guy that if they need to, they could play him as a rookie. He's an experienced guy. He bounced back from an average sophomore year, played very well as a junior. And if things with Connor and McGovern, if they need to shake things up in the line a little bit, he can step right in. So you gotta love that. Grable has grown a lot since his time at Jacksonville State as a tight end, and he's continued to grow during his career at UCF. And if he continues to build his leg strength and able to really get that anchor, he could be a phenomenal swing tackle for this team in the future. Daquan Hardy was another guy I thought they could pick. Not only for his great return skills, but also as a guy that's going to be able to play nickel for them. Maybe not as much this year as he gets into the game a little bit, but in time he's gonna be a part of that rotation, I think. And so really, and Ray Davis. Look, Ray Davis is a back that he pretty much anybody who followed this draft goes, look, you're going to be able to get Ray Davis on Ray 3. He's going to be a really solid pro for you. He can catch the ball. He has a good feel in traffic, and he has enough acceleration once he gets to the open field to really be a difference maker. So I really thought they did a great job finding value for spots that they needed players.
And I thought it was interesting, too. Now, certainly this is an off season where the Bills had more departures than they have had in the last handful of years, and significant losses as well, contributors. But they did get in this draft, albeit with 10 picks, they got help at all 3 levels of both sides of the ball. Yeah. Offensive line, running back, wide receiver, defensive line, defensive end, linebacker, and corner and safety. So they really bolstered the roster at every single position group.
And they needed to find a return guy, too. I think you want Shakir to really be a receiver as much as possible to take hold of that role this year. So you needed to find a return guy. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here about special teams to you, but when you find a guy like Hardy that can play on defense and who, as a punt returner, is willing to take that first step forward, and that's so important. And he's got the speed once he gets in the open field. So when you can fill holes on defense and offense and get special teams help as well, it was a really good draft for those guys, which is no surprise because Brandon Beane and his staff do a great job every year.
He did take a different approach to this draft, though, Chad, because in 3 of the last 5 drafts, he's traded up in round 1. Yeah. This year, he trades out completely, but he parlays that into 3 day 2 picks instead of just 1, which is what they had at the outset. And he told us after night 2, he had more players on their board with second-round grades than with first-round grades. So I think moving back was a very comfortable move for him to make, knowing he would have a bounty of players to choose from.
Yeah. And I mean, I think with the trades that they did, in the first round, they didn't necessarily gain picks, but they gained value in picks. And that's something you have to think about when you're making these trades. Right? Are you willing to take a 4th round pick, or are you more interested in swapping your 5th for their 3rd? So you're gaining that value. And, it's not always an easy choice. Some teams want loads more picks. Some teams want more value in those picks. Like, for example, when the Packers and the Bills made the trade for Rasul Douglas, The Packers didn't gain picks, but they moved from a fifth to a third. So it really depends on the situation and all that. But I think, again, like you said, even a team with as strong as a roster as the Bills had, you want competition on the back end of that roster. And they got guys that are going to be able to give them competition this year and then maybe sit on the practice squad if they don't make the team. And then next year they'll be back in the fold too. So I think they accomplished a lot of things in this draft.
Was this draft a sign of where the draft has come to, or is it a trend? You had 6 quarterbacks first 12 picks. I mean, it's unprecedented. You had offensive tackles. You had 14 players picked before they even picked a defensive player. Is this where the draft is headed, or is this the peak of where it's gone?
I think it was sort of a one-off. Now, every year people say, "Oh, but next year's class isn't that good." Well, guess what happened? Jaden Daniels was great this year, what people didn't expect. Bo Nix stepped up, and people didn't necessarily expect that. And next year, we've got some guys that people aren't talking about right now that are going to be in the conversation. So I expect that it will have. I mean, it's been typical now for a while that we've had 3 or 4 quarterbacks go in the first round, and I expect that to continue. I don't think we're going to see 5 or 6 every year, especially since this year was really high demand at the position at the top of the draft. So that's not going to happen every year.
Chad, knowing you're a researcher also, I don't know if you've ever researched this, but the Bills, the last several years with a veteran roster, have not been able to keep a lot of their late day 3 picks on their 53. They put them on the practice squad, and they get poached away by other clubs.
That's right.
And they're on 53-man rosters. I mean, Alex Austin, their 7th-round pick last year, just got re-signed by the Patriots to stay on their roster. And Nick Broker, their 6th-round pick last year, the offensive lineman out of Ole Miss, is still in Houston. And this isn't the first time this happened. Jack Anderson's in Indianapolis. He was a 7th-round pick 3 years ago. I mean, I can't imagine how frustrating it's got to be for Brandon Beane. Like, his personnel department is doing their job on day 3, and they can't hold on to those players to develop them. Now, it might be a little different this year with the roster turnover they've experienced. I think there is a greater chance for all of their day 3 picks to make the 53, but it's a risk that you're taking. I mean, you're talking about Tylen Grable having to grow into his frame, put on some more weight, now that he's an offensive tackle and not a tight end anymore. And I'm hoping that the Bills can hold on to him long enough to see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah. Look, it's a nice problem to have, okay? It's a nice problem to have because there are plenty of teams out there that have been, that are not evaluating these players necessarily as well as they could, or they're reaching for guys at other positions, and then they're scouring the deeper teams for more talent. And that's just part of the plan. I mean, you just have to evaluate the guys the best you can. And if they can't make the squad and they get poached by others, that's what you have to deal with. And interestingly, like a lot of the undrafted guys have this year too aren't bad players either. Half of them could have been drafted. So if you do a good job and other teams are able to, quote, take advantage of that, that's just part of the deal when you have a good staff, when you make good evaluations and, you live with that. You're just happy that you have the best roster you can to win games on the field. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, usually undrafted free agent guys, you kind of go under the radar. Nobody knows who they are. But then you get a guy that has the name Frank Gore. And people are like, oh, hey, I know that guy. And So the Bills signed Frank Gore's son. Yeah. Reportedly signed his son. Some of these names that a lot of people don't know about. And you said half of these guys could have been drafted in other circumstances. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the guys that were reportedly looking at the Bills.
Well, I mean, Rondell Bothridge was really good at Wake Forest and, productive at Oklahoma, a really solid player. And he wasn't a plus athlete in his workout, so that hurt his game. But like a guy like Keaton Bills from Utah, okay, really strong guard, really strong player, not a plus athlete, but a fine player. This is one of these guys that is going to stick in the league for a while, and you got him, off the street. And if this is a guy that ends up on the practice squad, it really won't surprise me if another team signed him. There's like Mike Edwards from Campbell's another name that a lot of people don't know. But for a guy his size, 340 pounds, 330 pounds, he can really move. And I was surprised he wasn't drafted. I think he's going to be a guy that sticks in the league as well. So this is what a good scouting staff does. They pick the guys they need to pick. And when the free agency rolls around after the draft, they've been in conversation with these guys for a long time before the draft ends. They're able to convince them, hey, come here, we'll give you a shot to make the roster, and that's all you can do. So they've done a really good job both during and after the draft.
You mentioned Bothroyd. Is he like a true edge guy? Because he's a little bigger, than a bend the pass rush arc kind of edge. Is he more of like an edge setting, run stopping guy that offers you some pass rush? Like, what is his kind of description?
Yeah, I mean, he's not quite as big as Greg Rousseau, but he's in the same thing. He's not a bendy guy. And look, there's a lot of guys that will get picked because of the flexibility. And look, Javon Solomon, who I didn't even talk about before, is a shorter guy on the edge, right? But he has some flexibility, and he has the strength to play through blocks and avoid blocks. He's got a nice Euro step. And so, I mean, these guys can win in different ways. And you're really looking for guys that can win in whatever way they can, to hold the line of scrimmage, to do their assignment in whatever way they can do. And I think Bothroyd's a guy that can hold the line very well. And if you try to escape to the sideline, he has enough athleticism to go get you, or at least, allow the linebacker to come get you. He can do some things to help you as, coming in sub packages and if injuries hit, that kind of thing.
One of the things about the draft, 32 teams trying to pick from the same pool of players, all of whom have different needs. Some are in dire straits, and others are just trying to put the cherry on top of the cake. Who are the teams that came the furthest? I know that there are some teams like Minnesota and Chicago who had multiple first rounders who got some really, really talented guys. What are some teams that really managed it very well and who are tangibly better today than they were a week ago?
Well, the one team that when people ask me going into the draft, which team needs to hit a home run? And to me, it was Arizona, because they've been stuck in this rut of mediocrity for a long time. And they need to take that next step to compete in the NFC, for the NFC title. And, getting the guys that they got, they had a lot of picks coming in, and they decided, hey, we're not going to trade down, from 4. We're going to take Marvin Harrison. We're going to take Darius Robinson at the end of the first round, that edge rusher we need. Trey Benson in the 3rd round was a pick that I had forecast in my 7th-round mock draft. I'm taking Trey Benson. So they did a lot of great things. And if Kyler Murray and these can stay healthy and these guys make improvements, this is an Arizona team that can get up to the playoff contention this year. And they have to, because they've just been stuck in a rut for too long, and they need to make that next step.
All right. Well, listen, Chad, we thank you for the insight on that. We appreciate it. And we'll keep an eye out for the undrafteds to be made official next week. But, yeah, people are already interested in Frank Gore Jr., as you can understand. He did spend a season here, the senior, that is. I'm just amazed that their careers are only about 3 yards apart or 3 years apart from one another.
I know. And he's a guy that's not a great athlete, but like his father, teams are going to wish that probably they took him in this draft or, thought of him a little sooner, because he's a really solid back that's going to play in the league for a while.
Right.
Chad, thanks as always.
Thanks,
appreciate
Chad.
the time.
Thank you guys for having me on.